Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about senior engineers. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, as a senior software engineer joining a new team, would you say that the software engineering manager will lose confidence in you if you don't speak up in team meetings? No, usually not. It depends a little bit on the manager, of course, but something that is pretty good to know is that for the most part, the requirements on soft skills and social skills are on average, unless you're dealing with someone who is very idealistic and high on the emotional intelligence spectrum as a manager. It's usually not as high of a requirement as you might think for the senior software developers. And I would say that that goes in general. So I know that I've been saying that soft skills are important, and let me just explain a little bit how this game is usually played and when soft skills are extremely important and when they're not so important. So usually when a engineering manager is hiring a new software engineer, they do a bunch of interviews and they get a feel for, as I'd like to say before, guys, there is a gut feeling that you give a person when you do an interview, because frankly speaking, there is no way to objectively say you are a excellent software developer and you're going to be perfect for this role, or yeah, no, you're absolutely horrible, you can't possibly be able to do these sort of things. You can get estimates, you can get gut feelings, but there's simply not enough information to go on to cover all the things. Unless you're extremely good or extremely bad, it's very difficult to say in between. And so what they will do is that they will weigh sort of your strengths and your weaknesses up from their perspective, of course, based on the information that they have gathered during their interviewing process, which is usually just a code test and a personal interview. In some cases, it might just be a personal interview, but there's almost always a personal interview. And depending now on their social skills, they will get a guesstimate of your social skills based on their understanding, of course. Which means that if you are very introverted, and I've said this before, guys, you don't have to be an extrovert to get the job, because the main thing that the company is looking for is what we call culture fit. And culture fit is a little bit subjective, of course, but in essence, it can mean that it's fine that you're not the person who might raise your hand in every meeting and have a lot of opinions and be very outspoken or things like that. It might be completely fine in one situation, and in another situation, they might be looking for someone who is more of a driving force, someone who takes more room and sort of pushes things a little bit more. It depends on you as a profile, so it's not like you're just going to have issues with your manager if you're not much of an extrovert or outspoken, as some people might think. There are situations where that is, on the other hand, the case, which is when you are expected to take on more of a leading role. So an example would be if we can actually take me as an example here. So as in my current role, I work as a principal engineer, and the idea behind that role is to act as a technical leader of software developers. So apart from the software development I do myself, the expectation is that I can mentor people, that I can engage with groups of developers, and I can answer their questions and act as a support and things like that, right? So the requirements on my soft skills might be higher, and that is something that they see as a big benefit, the fact that I have proven to have a bit of soft skills at the very least. If you are very, very, very on the introverted scale here in this sort of role, it's not a deal breaker per se, but they might not, like your manager might not feel all that comfortable with, for example, putting you in charge of putting together like learning initiatives or things like that in the same to the same extent. They will still do it if there are no other options, because even the most introverted people, and unless they say no, of course, are able to hold a presentation, to discuss things in an open forum and things like that. Some people are absolutely extreme, but it's by no means a deal breaker. And I don't think I've ever seen a software engineering manager have like confidence issues or feeling like, yeah, this person is, oh no, they're too much on the passive side and things like that. It's on the contrary more common that you get encouraged to engage. There might be culture differences here, but at least in my region, there's not much in terms of trust issues when this is the thing that we're discussing. Trust issues usually come from your ability to perform and word of mouth. So I've said on many occasions that one of the most important things for you is absolutely to be a good software engineer, but I've also warned you to be too opinionated and sort of, especially when you're in your earlier days of your career, when you start getting a little bit more confident in your development and you start experimenting with new ideas, and you might find yourself in a team that don't really like your ideas, or like they don't really like the way you do things. And even if Uncle Bob, Linus Torvalds, and like every single guru that you can imagine come in and say, yeah, you are absolutely right, if your team doesn't like that way of doing things, it's a dangerous road for you to walk because of this other thing, as I was saying, word of mouth. So what usually happens when people lose confidence in you as a software developer, it comes from coworkers complaining about you, or software not working, or the system being shitty, and that those two are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Both of these things can combine and compound in ways that are very sad, where you have a manager first seeing that there are issues with the system and then starting asking the quite obvious question, okay, so why are we having issues? And then the finger pointing starts, even though we're supposed to have a no blame culture. I hope that we're all intelligent enough to understand that that is an ideal, but it's not always the reality. And so what's going to happen is that your manager is going to go and talk to people that he or she feels are trustworthy. And that's one of the things that happens with me, for example. Like, one of my scariest roles is that when the managers for the various developers that I work with, when they feel like things aren't really performing and so forth, guess who they come and ask? Who is the problem? And that's where, that's why my soft skills are necessary, because if they feel like they can trust my competence as a software developer, and they feel like they have a good rapport and like a good back and forth with me, they will come and ask those sorts of questions, and they will take the word of someone who they have a good connection with above most other things. And that is the thing that is most important. If they don't have confidence in you at a personal level, as I said, you don't have to be the most outspoken person in the room, but you have to have a social connection with them, and you have to have like a fairly decent performance level without having a lot of people complaining about you all the time, or failing and so forth and so forth. These things are a lot more important for your confidence level and your job security, if you will, than whether or not you're the person who's always coming up with all the ideas in a meeting or things like that. So what I want you to take away from this is that no, managers usually don't lose confidence in you if you don't speak all that much in meetings and things like that. It has to do mostly with, one part, your ability to perform as a software developer, which also ties into how are people in general talking about you when people get asked about you. And so your brand within the company and your soft skills should be geared more towards having a good working relationship with people, as opposed to being concerned that you're never speaking up or things like that. There are situations where that is extremely important. Like for me, for example, if I'm going to facilitate things, or do things that has more to do with leadership things, then there is a little bit of a higher expectation, of course, on me to do these things. So I don't just sit back and don't really engage or anything like that. But for the average senior, that's not the case usually. So if you're going to be concerned with confidence building with your manager, prioritize the core things. Number one, make sure that you do your best and you do a good job on average. Number two, make sure that you have a good working relationship with your coworkers. Those two things matter more than every single best practice, every single guru advice, all of these sorts of things. Because at the end of the day, guys, your gurus and your different newsletters and books that you have read and so forth, they will give you really, really good information usually, but they are not in the room when your coworkers and you have to negotiate, okay, how are we going to solve these problems? And they're not in the room when your manager comes and talks to you about your performance and your performance review and things like that. Then it's just you and them and your relationship that is going to matter at least 99% of the time. Have a great day.